Greetings to all who are listening in. Normally I don't do this style, but for the sake of time, I wanted to do a complete analysis on the movie Black Panther. I specifically waited to see this movie because I understood that the theaters were very crowded, that there were a lot of people who were excited to see this movie. Now, I just wanted to see it to fill in the gaps between Civil War and Infinity War. I just want to see the movies like that. I don't take the Marvel Universe too serious. I used to be a big fan because I used to read the comics a lot. However, as a Christian now, a lot of my focus is geared toward preaching the gospel. So I do go to see these movies as entertainment, but I don't try to take them too seriously. However, with Black Panther, I noticed, particularly in American culture, there was a big hoopla about this movie, more than any other Marvel movie to date. And as a believer, as a saint, when people start flocking to something like that, I mean like in masses, and it's not Jesus, I put up a red flag. And that's what I'm going to be talking about, this red flag. The more I talked to Jesus about it, the more red flags started coming up. So I never would have done this if I didn't see all of these red flags with people going crazy over this movie. Some of my closest friends, they made a very big deal about this movie, never seen a Marvel movie before in their life. So let's get the disclaimer. I am not bashing Disney with this. I am not bashing the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm not bashing Black Panther as a movie. I am not bashing people. I am just trying to make those who call themselves saints aware of what could possibly be going on behind the scenes when you openly support something that is as big as this movie has become. For this part, I want to get into some issues that I have with the leading up to the movie. First, one, you talk about the first black superhero. This is not the first black superhero movie. Meteor Man came out over 20 years ago. Blank Man came out over 20 years ago. And Blank Man was actually one of my favorites because although it was a comedic movie starring Damon Wayans, it actually dealt with a nobody. He was a geek. He was just a person who decided, I don't like the crime in my own community. I'm going to help my own community get out of this. Okay? So it was just a regular guy standing up for what was right. Okay? That's where I like about Blank Man. And then in 97, you had Spawn, which was heavily promoted because Spawn was a big thing back in the 90s. The guy, Al Simmons, goes to hell, comes back, realizes he made a deal with the devil, and he actually fights against the devil. Not my cup of tea today, but back then it was very big. And Blade came out in 1998, which was a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. He had 3 of them, and it seems as if everyone had just forgotten about that. Currently, there's Luke Cage on Netflix, and there's no talk about black superheroes there. So there have been plenty of black superheroes in the past. This is not the first time that this has been attempted. And then the second piece I heard was this was the first to portray Africa in a positive light, which is also not true because if you go back to Eddie Murphy with Coming to America, he was portrayed as an African king. Yes, it was a comedy, but he was a king. And he was coming to America, and he discovered that America has some customs that are pretty corny and goofy, and he had to get used to that because he was treated as royalty. Also, you might not like this, but I will even include The Lion King because that took place in the savannah. It was in Africa. They specifically mentioned that that was Africa, and it portrayed Africa also in a positive light as well. So this is not the first time that Africa was seen as positive. There were other movies, but these are just 2 that just come to mind as I was just writing things down. These are just 2 that I've seen that come to mind that Africa is portrayed very positively. And then I also heard that this movie was promoted. You know, no black movie has been promoted this way. And that gives me a sense of you feel like you're gaining something because this movie is promoted and we need to really do something about this. Well, I wanted to put in a few tidbits of information here. This movie is promoted because it's owned by Disney, and Disney is not a black company. Disney is not an African company. Disney is a white-owned company. First movie specifically, Snow White. It is a Snow White-owned company. So I give you the metaphor of the slave master. Let's say the slave master back during slavery times put a black man in charge of the cotton picking plantation. Okay? Just because there's a black man who is controlling the plantation, it does not mean that you are now free, that you have gained all of this. It is still a white-owned plantation. The black man is just in charge of running this one. You're still a slave. You're not actually gaining. So I didn't understand people talking about the promotion of this movie. This was Disney promoting the movie. Disney also made Princess and the Frog. This was Southern black culture, and they made Tiana royalty. They made her a princess. Nobody cared about that. It wasn't expressing black culture in a positive way during that time. It wasn't promoted that way, but it was still that. Disney also made Moana for Polynesians. They made Mulan for Chinese. They made Aladdin for Middle Easterns, and Aladdin wasn't even Middle Eastern. If you read the original story, Aladdin was Chinese. They made Pocahontas for Native Americans. They made Brave for Scottish. Okay, they appeal to all cultures and all people. But for some reason, there was a huge hype here. Okay, that should let you know that there's something behind this. Disney did not care about black people. They don't care about the culture. They care about money. Disney is a multi-billion-dollar industry. They bought Marvel cash. They paid billions of dollars, cash transaction. They bought LucasArts. They bought Star Wars. Okay? Disney is known for having cash money to do what they want to do. So they're going to push their agenda. And if you notice, they've been doing it. Their agenda is witchcraft. Their agenda is magic. They are a witchcraft company. So if the show or the movie does not push that, Disney's not going to put all of their money and their resources into it. And they've been doing that with Marvel since they even bought it. Marvel's always had witchcraft and magic in it, but they push it even more in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I give this to you with the movie Thor. Thor is based on Norse mythology, white gods and goddesses, particularly Scandinavian. That's what Norse is about. And then also you've got Black Panther now that's appealing to Africans. Okay, Wakanda, it's not a real place, but it's based on Africa, just like you have Norse mythology based on Scandinavia. Asgard, Thor's home planet, does not look like Scandinavia. And if you notice, Wakanda does not look like Africa, but it is a fictional place based on certain things in order to appeal to people. The problem I have with Wakanda is that Wakanda is supposedly supposed to represent 54 different countries in Africa, and this is not true. A lot of what was done there was based on South Africa. That's where the director said that he visited in order to get inspiration. These places did not send slaves to America. Okay, South Africa, Egypt. You don't see in their culture where mass sums of people were taken to the Americas, because in those countries they weren't taken to the Americas. So black culture believes that they come from South Africa when you really don't. So Wakanda, which is based on South Africa in this movie specifically, is actually not a product of black culture at all. Okay, you can tell this because you've got people lining up in dashikis which aren't even prevalent in South Africa. They're prevalent in Western Africa. But because this is the big thing, is that people in America, black culture specifically, do not have an identity. Their identity was taken from them. So because they have no identity, you often flock to anyone or anything giving you an identity. When someone says, be this, this is who you are, you'll often see a lot of African Americans flocking to that movement because they need to belong. And that's okay. If you want to do that, that's okay. But as a Christian, as a believer, your identity is supposed to be hidden in Christ. Christ gives us an identity. He lets us know who we are, where we come from, where we're going, who our Father is, who our Lord is, who our brothers and sisters really are. We already have an identity. So because you already have an identity, when the devil tries to get you to flock to something in order to gain identity, it does not work. And this is why I did not get hyped up over Black Panther, because I already have one. Most people who watch these Disney movies and they already have an identity actually get upset with Disney because of the incorrect portrayal of their culture. For instance, if you go back to Moana, there were quite a few Polynesians who were upset with the way that they portrayed it because it was incorrect. You had some Chinese who were upset with the way they portrayed Mulan because it was incorrect. You had quite a few Native Americans who were upset at the way they portrayed Pocahontas because it was wrong. Disney changed up a lot of the story. How about Hercules? A lot of Grecians were very upset because that was not the way that Hercules was written. However, Disney changed it to fit their patterns, and people were upset. I know quite a few Africans who saw this movie who specifically, they let me know that they were upset because this was not the way that their culture is. However, Disney makes it a certain way, and the only people who truly enjoy it are those who do not understand the culture of which they're being portrayed. So the people who liked Mulan, probably not the Chinese people who know the original story. The people who liked Hercules, not the original people who knew the story. And likewise, the people who liked Black Panther, you're not the people who descended from those nations of which they got the information, but you claim to be a part of it. And that was the issue, is that you claim to be Wakandian and you're not from Wakanda. The big deal about this, because you're saying, what's the big deal, right? Well, the big deal with this is that when you claim to be a part of something, when you claim this as your identity, you can't claim just one part. You have to claim the whole thing. And this is the big danger in claiming to be something when that's not necessarily who you are. Because these things can have other sneaky messages in there that you will start to become because you claim it. If you claim something, you claim everything that comes along with it. And this is the danger of claiming things as who you are, not necessarily something that you do. Okay, for instance, I do go to see Marvel movies, but I don't claim that as my identity. That's not who I am. That's just something that I do on the sidelines. Others claim that these things are who they are. And I wanted to talk about the dangers of that because after seeing this movie, if you claim to really associate with this, you are associating with certain things that you might not even understand is a danger to your salvation. Okay, so let's talk about Disney. Disney revolves around everything witchcraft sorcery. This is a witchcraft company. We all know that. There's magic everywhere. Magic of Christmas, magic of Halloween, magic of this, magic of that. If the show does not promote magic, chances are Disney is not going to accept it. And this is true with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that they've started to incorporate more and more magic. Now, Marvel's already had magic, but now they're putting it in a way to where people can accept it throughout the cinematic universe. For instance, if we go to Thor, you will see that Thor said to Jane in the first movie, he said, your ancestors called it magic. You call it science. You see, so they're switching magic now to being science, and there's a reason for that. They even did it in Black Panther as well, when Ross was asking about how people don't just get healed in one day. And Black Panther's sister said that. Here they do. It's not magic, it's science. Why are they doing that? They're doing that because they want you to trust them. They want you to understand that we're smart, and this is science, and anybody who thinks that it's magic is primitive. Okay, all the advanced societies like Asgard and Wakanda, it's not magic, it's science. When the truth is, it is magic. So the problem that people have is now they're saying, okay, advanced people have science and dumb people think that it's magic. So every time that God lists witchcraft and sorcery and things like that, now God is stupid because he just doesn't understand science. There have been so many people who assume that because I'm a Christian, that automatically that means my intelligence level is extremely low because I believe in the Bible. And then the more conversations they have with me, they understand I'm not as stupid as they once thought. In fact, there have been so many times where I have to dumb down my conversation just to talk to people. But because I'm Christian, it's assumed I don't understand concepts. I'm not well read. I'm just basically very foolish for believing in this old, outdated method. And then we talk, and people begin to get very frustrated with me. They see that I'm able to understand their concepts, and I'm able to also show them, well, what about this? And then it becomes well, you're just trying to do this and you're trying to do that. Why? Because the stigma is put into you that magic and science are the same thing, and smart people go by science, and foolish people call it magic. And that is not true. But Disney floods your mind with these types of messages. They flood your mind and they flood millions upon millions of dollars to promote this movie among blacks, when we already know that this movie was based on one nation, South Africa, and those nations are not slave nations. So all of the people who are in America, unless your ancestor did come here willingly, you actually are not Wakandian at all. Yet, this movie was promoted by Disney in order to appeal to all black people. That's called misdirection. See, Houdini would do things like this. He would use misdirection. Pickpockets do this all the time. They put your brain to focus on something, and then you're not able to process new information that's happening directly before your eyes. So Disney floods this movie with millions of dollars. The CGI in this movie was awesome. The technology in this movie was amazing. A-list actors, people who are not even African, but they were A-list actors in order to grab your attention. There were so many blatant sins going on in this movie that you did not notice because you were paying attention to all the smoke and mirrors, the flashing lights, the magic. When you have all of that going on, there are certain things that were directly said and done that people disregarded because they were desperate for an identity. I've even seen people making connections to Jesus Christ in this movie, and it made me realize that you are more blind than you might think if you're trying to think that this was more about Jesus than it was about other things. So let's talk about this movie, and we can really clear up a lot of these issues. Killmonger pretty much represented black culture, and T'Challa represented the African culture because it was basically black America versus African. Which ideology is right? You had both of these people who descended from the same, but one was in America, Killmonger, and another one was in Africa, Wakanda, T'Challa. Now, Killmonger was basically upset because he was saying that black people are oppressed all over the world. There are millions of black people who are living in oppression because of the white man. And many people sympathized with that because they often feel that black people are still being so oppressed by the white man. That's called misdirection. If you sympathize with this guy and you identify with him, you have to identify with everything that he's doing. Now, they had these marks, these tribal marks on them. If you murder a person or if you kill a person, they would give you one of these dots, and you would see them all over the people. And Killmonger, when he removed his shirt, you saw nothing but these marks. These marks were all over his front, his back. They didn't even show you his legs. But he admitted to killing people in different countries. He admitted to killing his own people just to get to T'Challa. And this is so wrong to be a murderer of this magnitude to get what you want. He's saying that if you kill, it is fine as long as you get to where you need to get to. If you sympathize with this man because white people are oppressing black people, so to speak, then you also have to sympathize with mass murder. Okay? And to get to T'Challa, who before the day didn't even realize that he existed. Okay? In fact, T'Challa, once he realized that, oh, I have a cousin here, this is wrong. Why did we treat him this way? So T'Challa would have worked with him. But now Killmonger, Eric Killmonger is his name, he actually killed all these people and would not work with T'Challa. He just wanted to kill him. Okay? He had a deep hatred. So you have to sympathize with mass murder. You have to sympathize with hatred. You have to sympathize with strife because he caused lots of strife and variance between nations. It wasn't the first government that he broke up. He broke up the Wakandan government. He also broke up other governments. They said that that was his training. He used witchcraft and manipulation just to get to Wakanda. He teamed up with the Claw and then essentially killed Claw because he needed to sneak his way into the palace by getting in cahoots with the Get Out guy. I can't remember his name in the movie. There was a mention of lust and fornication because after they were done with the first mission, he passionately kisses some lady in the ambulance and they close the door, and it's just supposed to be some interesting tidbit that they add in there. So you've got mass murder, you've got hatred, you've got strife, you've got variance, you've got witchcraft, and you've got lust, all embalmed in this one person, and we're sympathizing with him because of the one line about black people suffering oppression. And the biggest thing that I understood about this character is that his hatred, because of one man's mistake, he judged all of Wakanda, which is essentially prejudice. You are judging all kinds of people because of one man's mistake or one man's experience. You are prejudging others. And because of that, he took that hatred even further and wanted to judge the world. Listen to his plan. His plan was to take the weapons from Wakanda and distribute them around the world so that there could be mass wars started. And the world would be taken down by itself and he would be on top. He said this time we'll be the ones on top, okay? But he's on the throne. So he would be on top of Wakanda. Wakanda would be on top of the world. He wanted to rebuild the world in his image. Now, if you read the Bible, you should already know what book and what verse that has to do with. This is Satan. He wants to take the world and redo it his way. He wants to be the one who ascends his throne above the clouds because he feels that God is the oppressor and he feels that he needs to be the one in charge and in control. That's Lucifer. Now, you have people who are identifying with Eric Killmonger because they believe that he is representing the black culture by what he said, when in reality, he's representing all of these things that Satan does: murder, hate, strife, lust, fornication, witchcraft, variance, rage. All of these things are satanic qualities listed in Galatians. They're manifestations of the flesh. And all of these are put into this character that you are identifying with. Specifically at the end where he lost and T'Challa was offering him mercy and said, we could still heal you. And he's just like, for what? So that I could be locked up in prison? And he said that line, bury me at sea with my ancestors who jumped ship because they knew that death was better than bondage. And people went crazy over this line. I saw people were posting about it and all types of things. And remember, first of all, your ancestors were not on the boat. Because if you're from South Africa, you didn't have slaves that were sent over there. Two, a lot of ancestors were thrown over the boat. They were not jumping. There were a couple who did jump. But that wasn't so much because they knew that death was better than bondage, because they were in bondage. It was because of the way that they were treated during their bondage. They had disease. They had babies being killed. They had rape going on down there. They had starvation. It was a terrible, terrible way to live. And a lot of times when people get so low, they would rather die than suffer. Eric Killmonger did not suffer. Eric Killmonger lived in a deceived state. And this is what the Bible talks about, how you will have evil people who go on deceiving and being deceived. He was deceived. His whole life, he was deceived. Was he in pain? Did he get hurt? Yes. But he was deceived. And because of that, he did everything that he could in order to get his hatred lashed out at the world and make himself God. Another thing that I noticed in this was that his oppressors were the enemies. He said he wants to get to the oppressors. So my question to you is, where were the oppressors in this movie? The oppressors were nowhere to be found in this movie. The oppressors, he actually worked with Claw in order to get his deal done, which was to get to Wakanda. Now, Killmonger, we said already, killed many of his own people just to get this done. So he doesn't care about Africa. He didn't care about his people. He cares about killing. He just wants people to feel the pain that he felt. That's really what it was. So he's got these weapons, and they were trying to send the weapons off. Get those planes up and get those weapons out of Wakanda. So that's really the mission. The mission is to stop these weapons from getting to the other country. Where was T'Challa to stop these weapons? He did not do that. He fought against his people. In this movie, you see a lot of Wakandan black people fighting against other black people. You do not see the oppressors anywhere in this movie. If they're the enemy, where are they? What this movie is showing you is that it's okay that when one black person says, we need to help by getting our resources out there and really helping people, and then you have another black person who says, well, we need to get our resources and kill them and overturn them. That's okay. Kill each other. That's really what was happening in this movie. Black people killing other black people. Who was the one to actually stop the weapons? Ross, the white colonizer, as they referred to him. They referred to him as a colonizer. He is an oppressor. He is a white boy, what they call him. Yet, he is the one who actually stopped the weapons. He used their technology and actually his bravery, even though he was being shot at and could have been killed, he stopped the weapons. So, black people can fight and slaughter each other. That's fine, while the real threat is being taken care of by the oppressors. The oppressors are the ones who are really handling the situation. That is a direct symbol of what is happening today. Black people are killing each other, they are slaughtering each other, but white people are the ones who are handling the big problems. Not trying to ruin anyone's party, but these are the types of things that you do not see when you just try to claim this as your identity. You claim to be like Eric Killmonger. You claim to be like T'Challa. You claim to be these people in these movies, but you don't want to accept the other traits that come along with it. And that's just claiming to be one of the characters. You also have to look at Wakanda itself and the Wakandan culture, because they did spend a lot of time going through Wakanda. They would give you their culture. And I noticed that Wakanda, especially their religion, is based on ancestor worship. This is very pagan, where people will call on the spirits of their dead ancestors to give them advice and to give them power and to give them strength. This is called necromancy, and it is strictly forbidden in the Bible. But Black Panther does this several times. He talks to his dead father. Killmonger did it. He talked to his dead father. Angela Bassett did it. She specifically told T'Challa that she will talk with his father about this all the time. And I was thinking, oh, maybe when she dies, they will both be together, is what she's saying. But then she looked off to the side and she's like, he is with us now. And I'm like, okay, if he is with you, that means that he's not with God. When somebody dies, particularly a Christian, they go to be with God. They're absent from the body, but they are present with the Lord. They're not present with us anymore. That's not the way that it works. But you have this religion that calls on ancestors and they worship them. Angela Bassett did this when Black Panther was almost dead. She held up this plant and she's like, I call upon the ancestors. They would say that a lot. Praise the ancestors. She was summoning ancestors. The problem is that you can't summon ancestors because they're dead. When you try to summon them, what you're summoning is a familiar spirit. Saul did this when he tried to conjure up Samuel in the book of Kings. He tried to get a woman who could conjure up spirits, demon spirits, and she tried to conjure up Samuel. And when it actually worked, she got so scared that she ran out of the room. Okay? And what happened to Saul? Samuel's message to him was, you're going to die tomorrow for what you've done. That was basically it. You tried to get advice, but you're actually going to get death. Okay? So these things were actually a practice. There were people who tried to call on their ancestors and ended up calling up demons in their place. So this is a form of religion in this movie. It was necromancy. Another form of religion in this was called the juju religion. That's where you get that term juju beans, because you're placing curses on people. This is a religion that uses spells, and they basically use objects in order to conjure up their spells, their amulets, their in this case, their plants. Okay, so Black Panther actually got his power from a plant, and he used this plant. He communicated with the dead, and he took on the spirit of the Black Panther. Now, what they did not mention in the movie, because I know Marvel, is the plant is called the heart-shaped herb. Now, this plant's origin is because you had a panther god, a pagan demon god, come to Wakanda, and he gave it to them as a gift. Okay? Now, this plant was supposed to give them powers, because what they would do is when this plant was given to people of royal blood in Wakanda, they would actually take on the spirit of the Black Panther, of this Black Panther god. That's why there's only one at a time, because the actual demon god, his spirit would inhabit that person's body. So whenever they would do this, they would take on that Black Panther. They would transform into this demonic Black Panther. This was influenced a lot by Egypt's culture, where pharaohs would take on the spirit of their gods. You've got Amun-Ra, the combination of the sky, the sun, and, you've got all of these different gods. But in this, the harp-shaped herb was to be actually demon-possessed, is where Black Panther gets his power. It was a potion, which is a form of sorcery. It was a sorcery method in order to gain power by communing with a demonic spirit. That is the religion. And in the comics, it's actually called the Black Panther cult. It is the religion of the Wakandian people. They didn't mention that it was a religion in the movie, because if they mention religion, religion has a much negative connotation, and people wouldn't like that. They wouldn't openly come to and say, oh, this is actually a cult. All of this stuff is based on a religious activity. No, they're not going to say that. They're just going to do the actions and then tell you this is a representation of Black culture. Come see it. Everybody take on their identity. So you're actually, by claiming Wakanda, you are claiming to be a part of the cult of Wakanda. You see, if you are that desperate for an identity, then yes, you will take on all of these things just to feel accepted. That is the big problem here, is that you are trying to feel accepted by this culture. So even though you don't know it completely, you will take it on as your own. And you are taking on things that are completely not like Christ, that are specifically stated to be anti-Christ, and then you are saying that it is a good thing. Remember, woe to all those who call evil good. In the last days, people will speak evil things being good and good things being evil. Nobody wants to talk about the good things of Christ and how to love your neighbor and all of that. No, we want to identify with Eric Killmonger, who's killing people, who's hurting people, who's causing division, but he's actually fighting oppression. No, he's not. He's trying to be like Lucifer. And Black Panther, using the power of a demon god, being possessed by a demonic figure, is fighting them back. Black people slaughtering black people, where the people who are actually doing the work are the ones who are the so-called colonizers or the oppressors. This is what you are identifying with when you take this movie to mean something more than what it is. I'm not telling you that you're going to hell by seeing this movie. What I'm saying is that when you take it to a level to where you have to identify with the movie, when you have to identify with your sports team. There's nothing wrong with watching a game, but when you say stuff like "we won," you're trying to identify and be a part of that culture, when you're not supposed to be a part of the culture of the world. You're supposed to be a part of the culture of Christ. Do you really know what culture you're a part of? Do you really know your identity? Or are you desperate for one, so you will go wherever anyone tells you to go? Last thing I wanted to address, and this might make a couple of people more upset, but that's okay, is the women's movement. I don't agree with the women's movement. It is not biblical at all. It is actually something that is another antichrist movement. I do believe that women are women. They are one of the most, if not the most beautiful creation of God. I appreciate women. However, men and women are different. And instead of appreciating our differences, we have come to try and make everybody equal. And this is not so. We're not equal. Men and women are not equal. And it doesn't mean that one is better or worse. For instance, as a man, I cannot have a baby. That's not equal. That's not equal to a woman. That doesn't mean that a woman is worth more than I am. It just means that we are different. People have different ways of thinking. People look different with their skin color. People have different ways with their culture. And instead of appreciating certain things, we actually try to just do away with all of these and make our identity in certain things. So the women's movement, it's a double standard. For instance, many women in this movement still want to be treated with respect, with chivalry. However, if you were to fight a man is not supposed to fight a woman the same exact way because you're a woman. Well, if you're equal, then you need to be treated the same way in everything, not just being what you want over here in this category, and then, well, it doesn't apply over here. As a male, my wife, if someone breaks into my house, it's not equal, okay? It is my job to protect my family. I want to protect my wife. I don't want to send her out there and say, well, last time somebody broke into the house, I went and picked up the baseball bat and went searching throughout the house, even though I could have gotten shot in the process. So now it's your turn. It's equal. You go out there while I sit back here and watch the kids. No, as a man, I don't want to do that. I want to cover and protect my wife, as a husband is supposed to do. But this equal movement makes it to where women are supposed to feel empowered. Once again, you already are empowered when you're in Christ. But if you don't have that identity, you're going to flock to anything that causes you to feel as if you have some sort of authority or power. And that's what a lot of these things cater to. They made it to where the women were so powerful in this that even her husband submitted to her. And that's not a good message, because if you are a husband and you are submitting to your wife, that is literally the story of Genesis chapter 3 that caused the fall. The man was supposed to do the right thing, and he was doing the wrong thing. The woman came up and took control of the situation, and he yielded to what she was doing, and she was deceived. Now, granted, she wasn't so deceived in this movie. I'm not going to say that. However, it's literally the story of Genesis 3. This women need to take charge and do things. No, men, you're supposed to protect your woman. You're supposed to cover her. You're supposed to make sure that no harm comes to her. You're supposed to treat her, what does the Bible say? Love her like Christ loves the church. And Christ died for the church to make sure that the church was safe and sound. You're supposed to die for your woman. You're supposed to be so committed to your wife that anything that tries to come her way has to go through you first. You're supposed to protect your wife. You're supposed to protect your children. You are not supposed to throw your wife on the front lines and make her do the fighting for you. That's not the way that it's supposed to be. Okay? They're not built to do that. They're smaller. They're softer. I'm not saying that they're weaker per se. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that husbands are meant to protect their wives. We're supposed to love our wives at any means necessary. And people who know me know that. If you come from my wife, you're coming from me. I don't care whether my wife is doing everything right or not. If you speak a word against her, you speak a word against me. So I don't need my wife to even defend herself. There are times where something will happen, I will step up to the plate. I got this one. Okay? So there were so many things in this movie, and you're wondering why it was so heavily promoted. These are the reasons as to why the movie was heavily promoted. It was promoted because of witchcraft. It was promoted because of sorcery. It was promoted because of hatred. It was promoted because of murder. It was promoted because of black on black murder. And in order to identify with Wakanda, in order to identify with T'Challa or Killmonger, you would also need to identify with all of these things that come with it. Now, if you're identifying with these fleshly things, then when those curses come along with it, you have to identify with that. You cannot take little bits and pieces. If you have a piece of bread and you put yeast in it, it spreads. And that's what happens. People take on all of these cultures, and then when the curses of these cultures come along with it, the sickness, the disease, the high blood pressure, the diabetes, the cancer, the AIDS, all of this runs in my family. No, it runs in the family of the identity that you have chosen. But when you choose Jesus, Jesus doesn't have cancer. Jesus doesn't have AIDS. Jesus doesn't have high blood pressure. Jesus doesn't have blindness. Jesus doesn't have any of those things. That's when you get that identity. So the question is, what identity are you? If you're a Christian, then be a Christian. If you want to be involved in all of that other stuff, then that's your choice. But when you get involved with all that other stuff and all of that death and destruction comes along with it, remember, there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. Proverbs listed that 3 times in 3 different Proverbs. There is a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof is death. There are people who are calling evil things good. This was a good movie. No, it wasn't. Was it entertaining? Sure. Was it good? No. I would not do this if we did not have people who call themselves Christian identifying with this. Saints of God, that is the concern. It's not that you had a movie, because Thor is a bad movie too. But you didn't have people identifying with it. I don't want my children dressing up as Black Panther. I don't want them dressing up as Thor and going around claiming to be the God of thunder. We represent Jesus. So if you're going to do that, then do that for real. Take this more seriously. Those are my concerns and my deep analysis with this movie. I'm not trying to ruin anyone's day. I hope that this does not. What I do hope is that this challenged you to take your walk with Christ more seriously and to do your homework and to do your research before you're in the theaters with dashikis and raising your hands to Jesus and doing dances and taking pictures with the Black Panther fist up and all types of things that are happening. Be careful, people. Don't be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever you sow, you will reap. And it's time out for people to reap all of these things. These divorces, this lust, this fornication, this murder, all these things are happening to our families. They're being broken up. Marriages are being torn apart. Women are usurping authority. Men are jellyback, not even standing up for their families. They're running away. They're not raising their own children. They're letting television tell their children who they are. Men, where are you? Where are you? But men don't even know who they are either because their father's not in the house. If you notice, all of these things are happening, and it's because you are claiming an identity that is not Christ. Find out who you are. And when you go to Jesus, he will tell you. He'll be able to commune with you, and you'll be able to fellowship with him. He lives. So please do this, saints. If you need prayer, please message me. I pray daily. If you have questions, you can contact me. You see the title is Yophi Smith. You can contact me via social media or email. It does not matter. And we can continue this. If you have any questions, if you have any qualms, I'm not one to argue back and forth a lot. If I see that it is a discussion that will yield results, that's fine. But if this challenged you, let me know in the comments. Let me know that, hey, I was feeling some of the same things, or hey, I didn't know this. Put it in the comments, and we can really grow together in Christ. Peace be to the brethren. Yophi Smith. So be it. Amen.